Good morning. Really. Great to see you here. Professor Ruplal, Chairman of the Governing Body, Dr. Pradim Kumar, Officiating Principal, Dr. P.K. Sinha, Dr. Sri Pratish Rai, the Prime Minister, and of course, you're the leader of the opposition, Pulkit Shokan. Teachers, students, friends, I hope that covers everybody. It really is a privilege to be here. I know it's customary to begin speeches by saying what a privilege it is to stand on the stage, but today I particularly feel it's a privilege because I've been told by your principal that in the 114 Founders' Days you have had in this college, this is the first time that a Stephanian is addressing you. So it really is a privilege, and you know, we've had a long and by and large friendly rivalry for over a century, the two colleges. We used to have a lot of jokes about you folks, and I suspect you had some jokes about us. Yeah? I'll tell you one of ours if you'll tell me one of yours later. One of ours was, what is the most important thing Hindu college has that St. Stephen's College doesn't have? Good neighbors. Anyway, no, the truth is that despite these jokes, the rivalry was always good-natured. The last time I stood on the stage was in 1974 when I won the inter-college debate here. I think it was a Premchand Memorial Debate. And I used to debate a lot, so I won many debates, but this one I remember with particular satisfaction because it was an Hindu college. And equally, when I went through your library and saw all the trophies, the pride with which your principal pointed out that the Hindu college basketball team had won the tournament at St. Stephen's College. That pride is also. So it really is the same thing. In my time, every single year, the inter-college cricket final used to be contested between St. Stephen's and Hindu. I gather both colleges have fallen on hard times in the cricket field. Now the alumni are busy playing each other. And my friend Mr. Oberoi, who was my contemporary here when I was there, he's actively involved, and they've been playing each other every year at Firozshah Kotla. And there are former test players playing for both sides. That's how good it used to be. But you know, looking back, this kind of nostalgia of the middle-aged is not what I want to do today. I really want to look forward, because the fact is that we are living in an age in which many people say that the argumentative Indian whom Amartya Sen made famous has been replaced by an increasingly cynical Indian, that young people are disillusioned with the way things are in the country, or so it is claimed, that they see nothing but corruption, price rise, inefficiencies of various sorts, economic setbacks. And you know, I'm always surprised to hear these things. They're usually said by older people, not by the younger ones. But particularly when the young ones say it, and I'm standing here before a college in which I'm sure 90% of this audience doesn't share that view, but you are here. You are the future of our country. And I ask myself, is the cynicism or the claim to cynicism at all justified? Well, yes, we have problems. I've never pretended we don't have problems. But the real question is, what are we doing about them? You know, there's this old line that this glass of water is, to an optimist, half full, to a pessimist, half empty. Actually, there's also some who suggest that the other half might be full of hot air, but I won't get into that. But the question is really irrelevant, because, right, if you're drinking from the glass, then it's half empty. If you're pouring into the glass, it's half full. It's a question of the context that you're looking at it. But my wife told me something very interesting. She said, you know, that's not really the question. It doesn't matter whether the glass is half full or empty. What matters is, what more can I put into it? What is the difference I can make? And that's a question I'd like to ask you. What more can be put into that glass of water? What more can we do to take it forward? I want to talk about three things briefly. What we should, I think, put into that glass, and that glass is our country and our feelings about that country. What we are, who we are as a civilization, what we have made of it today, and where we're going. What we are as a civilization is something we should never allow ourselves to forget. It is said that today's youth are focused on the sciences and technology and engineering, that they have no time for history, no time for the past. And impatience with the past is fine. But we can't afford to forget what has made us who we are today. What the civilization that we are the heirs to as Indians today stands for. This is an extraordinary country, and there is really nothing like it in the world. Do you know that we have been home to almost every single ethnic group known to mankind, which has found free and open welcome on our shores since the days of antiquity? For example, we have the oldest Jewish population outside Palestine. Why? Because when their temple was attacked by the Babylonians 500 years before Christ, and then later by the Romans, Jews fleeing that attack, those attacks on them, got onto boats, came across the Arabian Sea, and landed in my home state of Kerala. And then they never knew a single instance of anti-Semitism. India was the only place where the Jewish people didn't suffer any persecution or discrimination in their entire history of being a diaspora in different places in the world. Christians, the famous apostle, St. Thomas, doubting Thomas of the Bible, he landed on the shores of India sometime around 52 AD. And the legends in Kerala say that he was welcomed on shore by a flute-playing Jewish girl. What a lovely image that is. And of course, because he made converts at that time, there are Indians who can trace their family's commitment to Christianity far longer than any European or American can today trace their connections to Christianity. That too is something we forget. Islam came to India not only by the sword as it did in the north, but peacefully in the Prophet's own lifetime by travelers, traders, and missionaries across the Arabian Sea to the southwestern coast of India. Again, made converts there. In fact, a Kerala monarch converted to Islam, made the pilgrimage to the Hajj, and poor chap died before he could come back. But he took with him coconut trees from Kerala, and as a result, on the Arabian Peninsula, on the coast of Oman near Muscat, there are Kerala coconut trees growing in Arabia. That was the sort of openness that we used to practice 1500 years ago. The Parsis came to Gujarat. There's a lovely story, by the way. They were fleeing persecution in Persia. They came, apparently, a couple of ships full to the brim with people, refugees seeking refuge. They came to the coast of Gujarat, and the king said, oh my God, we don't want all these new people staying here. So he sent an emissary to them. And the emissary, of course, couldn't speak, didn't have a common language with the Parsis. So apparently he took a glass of water, like this one. And it was full though, not half full or half empty. And he dropped a stone into it and the water overflowed to show there is no room for more people. Before he could leave, the Parsi captain stopped him. And he brought out a glass of milk and slowly stirred a spoonful of sugar into it, to show that the new arrivals would not only fit in with the culture, but sweeten it. The king was so impressed with this story that he invited them to remain, and that's why to this day, the Parsis of India hail Gujarati as their mother tongue. Now, these are stories, I can tell you 100 more like this, but they are just examples of the openness of our civilization, which we should forget only at our peril. When I was in high school in Calcutta, way before you were born, before your parents were born, probably the late 60s, I still remember in the neighborhood where I lived, you could hear the wail of the muezzin calling the Islamic faithful to prayer, blending, literally blending with the chant of the mantras and the tinkling of bells of the Shiva temple at the corner, which in turn had to compete once in a while with the loudspeakers outside the Gurudwara reciting verses from the Granth Sahib, and just around the corner was St. Paul's Cathedral. That was the Calcutta I grew up in. That was the India that we all cherish. And let us not forget that. Let us never fall into the petty-minded bigotry of some who would reduce India to something less than it has always been. Let us cherish the greatness of this civilization that has given us what we have today, that has given us a situation when our neighbor in 1971 declared not only war but a jihad against us. What was this jihad fought by? Well, our air chief in the northern sector, later the Air Chief Marshal of India, was Air Marshal Latif, a Muslim. The commander of the armed forces was a Parsi, General Manekshaw. The GOC Command, Eastern Command, who had to lead the troops that marched into what became Bangladesh, was a Sikh, Jasdeep Singh Arora. And the Major General who was helicoptered into Dhaka to negotiate the terms of the Pakistani surrender after we won was Jewish, Major General Jacob. That is India. And that should always be the India that we value and cherish. So much for what we are as a civilization. What have we made of it since independence? I'm proud to say we have preserved that essence through something that we could not have taken for granted in 47, and that is democracy. Our democracy was not an easy choice. Remember the horrors of partition, the flames burning across the land, the million people butchered in the riots of partition, 13 million people losing their homes, billions of rupees worth of property destroyed. The time of chaos, and at the same time the time of challenge, of creating a new state out of the remnants of the British Raj, integrating the princely states, all of this. It would have been very easy for Nehruji and the other leaders of that time to do what so many leaders in so many other developing countries that were freed from colonial rule did, which is to say, no, we need dictatorship and authority to be able to control all this and to weld the nation together and to promote development. They didn't take that easy choice. They stood up for democracy, and that democracy that we take for granted today was hard fought for, was won, and was preserved in the face of the most amazing odds. That democracy rests on some very, very fundamental principles in our country. It rests on the very simple idea that in a country with the civilization that I've described to you, you can be many things in one thing. You can be a good Bengali, a good Muslim, and a good Indian all at once. Because the whole logic of the Indian experience is, as Dr. Sinha quoted one of my lines from one of my books, that we're not perhaps this melting pot that the Americans are, where everyone comes and is melted together into one homogeneous American. We are in fact a thali. We are a collection of different dishes in different bowls. And because those are different dishes, they don't flow into the next. They're all in different bowls. But they belong together on that same thali, on that same plate. And they combine on your palate to give you a satisfying repast. That is why, and I'm not here to make a political speech, but way before I came into politics, what happened in 2004 that showed India at its best to the world? We had a general election that was won by a political party headed by a woman political leader of Italian descent and Roman Catholic background, who then made way for a Sikh to be sworn in as Prime Minister by a Muslim president in a country 81% Hindu. Can you imagine what that represented in the eyes of the world? 4 years later, when Barack Obama was elected in America, the whole world said, wow, what an amazing democracy. They've elected Barack Obama as president. Wonderful story. But for 200 years of democracy, every president and vice president had been white, male, and Christian. Look at us. Look at us in 2004. Look at us today. This is the India that our democracy has made possible. It's an India that rests on the idea that you can have divisions of caste, of creed, of color, of culture, of conviction, of cuisine, of costume and custom, and you still can rally around a consensus. And that consensus is on the very simple principle that in a large, rich, diverse democracy like ours, you don't really need to agree all the time, so long as you agree on the ground rules of how you will disagree. That is what our democracy has given us, a way of disagreeing. That's what your student parliament reflects. A prime minister and a leader of the opposition both seated on the stage, talking to each other, debating the merits with each other. That right to do that, and a system that preserves it, merits applause and not cynicism. That is what we should cherish in our country. The fact is that we have really missed the nationalism of an idea of an ancient civilization as I've described it to you, united perhaps by a shared history, a common geography, but sustained by this pluralist democracy. But this democracy requires the ability to disagree amicably. It requires that we not succumb to the kind of culture of competitive intolerance we've been seeing in the last few years, where each group seems to be competing with the others for the right to be more offended than the next one by something that is said or written or painted or made. Let us remember that we are what we are because we have the right to be who we are. That you can be yourself, and you're safe to be yourself because you are an Indian, because you're part of this democracy, this civilization of tolerance and cooperation. That, to my mind, is something that each of you young people should learn to value and respect and take with you forward, so that you will always realize what an extraordinary privilege it is to be able to take that for granted, because you are Indian. Garv se kaho ki hum Indian hain, because of that. And the third thing I said is, where are we going? Where are we going with all of this? I'll spend most of my time on that. It is a young country. You are a majority of young people in this auditorium, so is the country. 540 million under the age of 25. If you just take the kids between 10 and 19, we have 225 million in India. And not just that. What do those numbers mean? They mean that for the next 30, 40 years, whoever rules the country, whatever, we could have a dynamic, youthful, working-age population ready to take on the world at a time when the rest of the world, including China, is aging. And because of that, because indeed the people are so young and capable, the labor force that India can provide will be so much more significant than other countries. In China, in the next 20 years, the labor force will shrink by 5%. In the industrialized world, by 4%. In India, in the same 20 years, it will go up by 32%. Our average age today is 28. In China, it's 38. In about 10 years' time, the Chinese will be closer to 50. Ours will still be at 29. So you see the advantage that your mere existence, the mere facts of demography give us. But can that be translated into a demographic advantage? Only if we, as a people, are able to educate these young people as you are being educated here today. Give them the opportunities. If it's not a college or university education, give them vocational training. Help them learn a trade so that they can take advantage of what the 21st century India will offer them in this world economy of tomorrow. That is a big challenge for us. If we get it right, the world is ours. If we get it wrong, if we fail to do this, I'm afraid the signs of what could await us have already been apparent in incidents in 165 of our 602 districts, where frustrated, unemployed, unemployable young men have picked up the gun in the name of Naxalism and Maoism. That is not the future we want. We need to build a future of growth, of change, of inclusion, and of positive development. To my mind, the debate about whether the economy is doing so well, so badly, we used to grow at 8% for a couple of decades, thanks to the reforms unleashed by Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was finance minister and continued by later. Now we are reported to be likely to drop below 6%. But the important thing to remember is it's not just the 8% or the 6% that matters, it is the 25% at the bottom of our society who matter. Because if we can't make our society work for them, it won't work for the rest of us either. We need to embrace those who have been left out. We need to include the excluded. We need to give them opportunities to grow and succeed. And the fact is, this question of inclusive growth, it sounds like a slogan, it's very real. Why do we think, for example, that my party and the ruling government today don't speak of India shining? Of course we know India has been shining in many ways, especially during those periods of great growth. But we also ask ourselves, for whom has India been shining? And can we please ensure that India shines for those who've been left out? And in that process, just to give one example of many, we've created something like the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, where one member of every poor family below the poverty line in rural India is guaranteed 100 days of paid employment. And that money is paid not to a contractor but directly into a bank account. And if they don't have a bank account, we help them open one, so that 90 lakh bank accounts have been opened in the last couple of years in our country for poor people. Why do we do that? To ensure that people are not just getting charity, they're getting work, getting rewarded for work, and getting an opportunity. Therefore, the autonomy, the empowerment that comes with a salary coming into your own bank account. That is the transformation that matters. In fact, if you look at the kind of reforms that we've brought into our country in the last couple of decades, They're all fundamentally about empowering the less fortunate. Look at telephones. You know, when I went abroad to the US for graduate school, we had 600 million people in India and barely 2 million landline telephones. Okay? It was such a privilege that elected MPs had the right to allocate 15 telephone lines to whomever they deemed worthy. That was such a rare thing to have, a telephone. There was a waiting list of 8 years for the telephone, and of course there were millions, hundreds of millions of people who wouldn't even presume to put themselves on the waiting list. Look at that India, and look at the India of today, where we have almost 1 billion SIM cards in existence. And it doesn't matter that some rich people may have 2 or 3 or 4, the fact is that mobile penetration is somewhere between 60 and 70% of our population. More and more people, ordinary people, have been able to transform their lives by possessing a phone. And what do I mean about transforming their lives? I'll give you a couple of examples. A poor farmer, just 10, 15 years ago, what would he do after the harvest? He would harvest his crop, then either he, or if he was lucky, an able-bodied male relative, maybe a young boy, would walk 8, 10 kilometers in the hot sun to the market town, would find out if the market was open, would find out whether his crop that he'd harvested could be sold there, would find out what the competition was, what the prevailing price was. Then that young kid would walk back 8, 10 kilometers in the hot sun back to the farm. Then they'd load the cart and go off. Half a day's back-breaking labor, which is today saved by 1 2-minute phone call. Fishermen in my home state are now taking mobile phones out to sea. The state government has given them GPS programs where they actually have maps showing them where the best shoals of fish are, according to satellite technology. But then, once they've caught the fish, you know what they do? They come back near the coast and they start dialing the market towns along the coast to find out where they'll get the best price for the fish they've caught. Empowerment, autonomy, that's what is happening. I was in Kerala not long ago at the farm of a friend of mine in a rural area, a hot day, and he said, hey, would you like some coconut water, which as you know is the most refreshing thing you can drink on a hot day in the tropical parts of our country. I said, sure. So he picked up a phone, dialed his number, and a voice answered, I'm here. And right up on top of the nearest coconut tree, with his lungi around his knees and a hatchet in one hand and a mobile phone in the other, was the local toddy tapper, who brought down a coconut for us to drink. This is the India of today and tomorrow. You know, we must remember what these revolutions mean in practice. In fact, the Kumbh Mela is going on these days, but I remember a photograph from the last Kumbh Mela 12 years ago, which some of you may or may not have seen. It went around the internet. It was a photograph of a naked sadhu, right out of central casting, right? Scraggly hair, ash-smeared forehead, Rudraksha mala, bare torso, warts on his face, and this naked sadhu, scraggly beard also. And this, in this photo, this naked sadhu was chatting away on a mobile phone. And this is this picture of timeless otherworldliness connected to the tomorrow that India has created. A man who lives in a world without time, but who is connected by mobile phone to me, wants to chat to. That experience should never be forgotten. But some of the other paradoxes in our country are not so benign. We hold the world record for the number of cell phones sold every month, right? But we also hold the world record for the number of farmers' suicides. Because when our crops fail and our farmers have no other alternative, that's what so many of them do. We have an increasing spread of urbanization, more and more people living in our teeming cities, and yet 2 out of 3 Indians are still trying to scratch a living from the soil, far more people than our agriculture can sustain. We are a nuclear power now. We have this Indo-US nuclear deal. We talk about it with pride, and so we should. But 600 million of our people are still not connected to an electricity grid, and many of those who are suffering power cuts and breakdowns all the time. We speak about non-violence, our traditions of Mahatma Gandhi, but our independence has been soaked in blood. There have been sadly so many instances of sectarian violence, and that too continues to be a stain on our collective conscience. We are inventing medications for the world, generic medicines for AIDS and TB and so on, and export to other countries. But there are still millions of Indians who can't afford them and who don't even have a health center within a 10-kilometer walk of their places of residence. We can speak of a country increasingly connected by the fiber optic line, but we can't forget that there is a poverty line, and there are something like 260 million people on the wrong side of a line that has been drawn barely this side of the funeral pyre. So the challenges are enormous and we must never allow ourselves to forget them. I've spoken to you today of how much there is to be proud of, but let us never forget our responsibility to continue to make ourselves proud. Let us never, in looking at that famous glass, never forget that to some it is indeed half empty, and we need to fill it up, to put into it those things that can make their lives better. The truth is, we are doing so. I gave you some examples already. India's image around the world is changing so much for the better. We talked about telecoms, and I did that very briefly, but the larger thing is the extraordinary progress in all sorts of technological advancement. Thanks to our IITs. Now the name IIT is spoken of in the Western world the way MIT used to be. It's a brand name. In fact, Indians, when I went to graduate school a long, long time ago, 35 years ago, the standard image of Indians in the West was, beggars or naked fakirs lying on beds of nails, or somebody climbing up a rope with a snake charmer, that kind of stuff. Today, what's the image? Every Indian must be a software guru, a computer geek, a technological wizard. That's the cliche now. I had a friend who, like me, had done his honors in history at St. Stephen's, who was accosted by an anxiously perspiring European at an airport in Amsterdam saying, you're Indian, can you help me fix my laptop? This is now the expectation that comes of what Indians are all about. And we are innovating more and more. We're not just doing call centers for foreign countries. We're doing much more creative work. There are more researchers for GE and Philips and IBM in India than in their parent headquarters. And what's more, this kind of technological innovation, go on Google and type in the words within quotes, frugal innovation. Your first 20 hits will all be Indian stories, because we have become the world leaders in frugal innovation, innovating at an affordable price point for the poor. The world's cheapest cardiograms, the world's cheapest water filter, the world's cheapest insulin injections. All these are Indian inventions in India because of the Indian market, the need of the Indian consumer to be pulled out of poverty. That's what's happening in our country today. And it has a ripple effect in other ways as well. When the Americans, started a famous new television drama, not so new anymore, set in an emergency room of a hospital, ER, the first few episodes got massively negative reviews because people said, this is not realistic. How can you have an emergency room in an American hospital without an Indian doctor? And they actually had to create a role for an Indian doctor and cast an Indian actress in order to make sure that the emergency room was credible. That's also happening now in the image of India around the world. And then, of course, there is a much more basic thing of the popularity of Indian yoga, the increasing popularity of Ayurveda, the perennial popularity of our food, and, of course, the success of Bollywood. I'm a writer, not a movie guy, but so my attitude to Bollywood is best summarized in the tale of the two goats in the Bollywood garbage dump, who are chewing away on discarded cans of celluloid. And the first goat chewing at this thing says, this film's not bad. And the second goat says, no, the book was better. The fact is, as a writer, I always say the book is always better, but Bollywood has now captured the imagination of the world. Not just the Indian diaspora, the NRIs in different countries who are watching Bollywood movies, but even Arabs and Africans. I've met African prime ministers and presidents and foreign ministers have told me that the one thing they look forward to when growing up was seeing the Bollywood movie in the nearest town. I have a friend from Senegal in New York who told me that his illiterate mother takes a bus from her village to the capital city of Dakar once a month just to see an Indian movie. Right? I mean, she obviously can't understand Hindi. She's illiterate, so she can't read the French subtitles either. But our movies are made to be understood despite such handicaps. So, with the song and the dance and the action and laughter, she has a great time and she goes away with stars in her eyes about India as a result. This is also part of the calling card of what India stands for in the eyes of the world. And then, as I talked about our food, today Indian restaurants are so popular there's practically no city in the world where you can't find one. And in England, the old colonial power, in Britain today, there are more Indian restaurants than any other. In fact, there are so many Indian restaurants that they employ more people in Britain than the iron and steel, shipbuilding and coal mining industries combined. So the empire can strike back. Now this is the kind of thing that I feel we can also relish and celebrate, that all of this is happening. But I talked about those challenges. We mustn't forget them. They need to be dealt with as well. And our challenges, to use a modern metaphor, go right across the board. We need to get right the hardware of our development, by which I mean the ports, the airports, the roads, the railways, the highways, all of which need hard work, investment, transformation. But we also need to get right the software of our development, our education system. We expanded dramatically. The British left us when they left with 17% literacy. We've taken it to 74, but that still means a quarter of Indians can't read and write. We still have a lot to do. We need to get our healthcare right. We need to get sanitation right. In fact, in some cases, the two intersect. Do you know in how many of our poor schools, the lack of a simple thing like a toilet is a contributory factor to dropout rates from school? We've been doing so well at enrolling small kids, by the way, that right now our gross enrollment ratio in primary school is 104%. We've enrolled more kids than we thought existed in that age group. But by class 8 it drops to 69%. By class 11 and 12 it's 39%. By college it's 18%. Too many people are dropping out of our education system. We need to bring them in. That's one of the things that I'm focused on in my ministry. But we need to bring them and keep them there. And one simple thing, we're giving money through the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan for schools to build toilets for girls. Why? Because after a certain age, a girl does need to go to a toilet and change, and if she can't, she may just go home and never come back. And we need to reverse this trend. Educating girls, by the way, is the single most important thing we can do to transform any society. Because if you educate a boy, you do fine. You educate a person, that's very good. When you educate a girl, numerous studies have shown, when you educate a girl, you educate a family, you change a community, you transform a society. So keeping girls in school, seeing them through college, all of this we need to do. Both the hardware and the software of our development is essential. And if we do all this right, we are engaged in the great adventure of actually bringing Indian villagers into the global village. We're connecting 600 million of those who've been unconnected into the 21st century economy. Imagine how different the world will be when we finish doing that, and how different India will be. That is the India into which you young people are growing up. And because of the civilizational factors I described to you, because of the democracy that sustains them, this India will be one that is open to the interests, the contentions, the arguments within it, that is unafraid of the prowess of the products of the outside world, that is willing to face the world with confidence because it knows it has all the civilizational strength I talked to you about, and that therefore is determined to liberate the creative energies of its people. That is your India. That is the India you have inherited from our great founding fathers and mothers. That is the India that you will graduate from this college and go into. Seize it. Make it an India of which you can continue to be proud. Thank you. All the best for your Founders Day. Have a great year ahead. Namaskar and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor, for that inspiring address, which also, amongst other things, actually rekindled a feeling of friendly rivalry which had existed between the two colleges and which still does. Due to an unforeseen circumstance which has come up and which requires him to be present for a diplomatic engagement, which unfortunately he can't wriggle out of, as he informed me. Dr. Tharoor has regretfully indicated that he would like to be excused. I very warmly thank him once again on behalf of everyone present here and on my own behalf. To have spared his precious time, we would have loved to have had you with us, sir, for the rest of the program, but understand the circumstances which prevents you from doing so. I request Dr. Pradhuman Kumar to please escort Dr. Tharoor out. We now come to that part of the program which is so eagerly awaited by our young achievers, that is, our prize winners. This is the fulfillment of their hard labor, the hours of midnight oil that they have burned to reach the top. Today we publicly